Jake Phillips looked out the small window of the transport ship. The stars looked cold and distant. He was going to his new job, and he was not sure what to expect. The ship moved through space, carrying him to a place he had only heard scary stories about. The captain of the transport ship walked over to Jake. The captain was an old man with gray hair and worried eyes. He sat down next to Jake and shook his head. "You sure you want to do this job?" the captain asked. "Most people who go to Titan's Hold never come back the same." Jake nodded. He had been a soldier for 10 years. He had seen bad things before. But this job was different. This job was at the most dangerous prison in the galaxy. The prison held criminals so violent that even the toughest alien races refused to work there. "I can handle it," Jake said. He tried to sound sure of himself. The captain laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "That's what they all say. But you humans are the only ones crazy enough to take this job." Jake did not answer. He looked back, out the window. In the distance, he could see a large metal structure floating in space. It looked like a dark star surrounded by smaller lights. That was Titan's Hold. That was his new home. The prison was huge. It was built like a wheel, spinning slowly in the darkness. Around it were smaller ships that patrolled the area. Jake could see big guns on the outside of the prison. Those guns were not pointed out at space. They were pointed in at the prison itself. If the prisoners ever got out, those guns would destroy the whole place. The transport ship moved closer to the prison. Jake could see the thick metal walls and the small windows that glowed with red light. Behind those windows were the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. Creatures that killed for fun. Monsters that ate their own kind. Machines that had learned to hate. The ship docked with a loud clang. Jake picked up his bag and walked to the exit. The captain followed him. "Good luck, human," the captain said. "You're going to need it." Jake stepped through the airlock and into Titan's Hold. The air was cold and smelled like metal and fear. The walls were gray and covered with scratches. Some of the scratches looked like claw marks. Others looked like they had been made by very strong hands. A tall alien was waiting for Jake. The alien looked like a lizard that walked on 2 legs. Its skin was green and covered with scales. Its eyes were yellow and looked very tired. "You must be Commander Phillips," the alien said. Its voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "I am Vextal. I have been waiting for you." Jake shook hands with Vextal. The alien's hand was cold and rough. "I am ready to start," Jake said. Vextal made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Ready? Nobody is ready for this place. Come, I will show you what you have gotten yourself into." They walked through long hallways. The walls were thick and made of some kind of super strong metal. Every few meters, there were heavy doors with small windows. Behind those doors, Jake could hear sounds, growling, screaming, something that sounded like metal being torn apart. "The prisoners," Vextal explained, "we keep them separated. If they were together, they would kill each other. Or they would work together to kill us." They stopped at a control room. Inside, Jake could see screens showing different parts of the prison. On one screen, a huge creature with 4 arms was hitting the walls of its cell. On another screen, something that looked like a shadow was moving back and forth. "How many prisoners?" Jake asked. 237, Vextal said. "Each one is here because they cannot be kept anywhere else. Regular prisons cannot hold them. They are too strong, too smart, or too crazy." 3 humans were waiting in the control room. They stood up when Jake walked in. "This is your team," Vextal said. "They arrived yesterday." The first human was a woman with short black hair and serious eyes. She was tall and looked strong. "Lieutenant Amy Burke," she said, shaking Jake's hand. "I worked security on Mars before this. The second human was a man with brown hair and a friendly smile. He looked young, but his eyes were older. "Sergeant Nick Torres," he said. "I was a guard at the military prison on Europa." The third human was a woman with red hair tied back in a ponytail. She looked nervous but determined. "Corporal Lisa Grant," she said. "This is my first assignment off Earth." Jake nodded to each of them. "We're going to make a good team," he said. Vextal showed them around the prison. The place was bigger than Jake had expected. There were 5 levels, each one holding different types of prisoners. The most dangerous ones were kept on the bottom. The Krillians are on level 5, Vextal explained. They come from a world where the weak are eaten by the strong. They think torture is an art form. They have been known to keep their victims alive for weeks just to hear them scream. They walked past a cell with thick metal bars. Inside, Jake could see a creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard. It was huge, with muscles that bulged under its rough skin. When it saw them, it smiled, showing teeth like knives. "That is Gorak," Vextal said quietly. "He has killed more beings than any other prisoner here. He once destroyed an entire city just to see what would happen." Gorak stared at Jake with small, dark eyes. Jake stared back. He was not going to show fear. "Level 4 holds the Void Stalkers," Vextal continued. "They come from the dark places between stars. They feed on fear and pain. They can make you see things that are not there." On level 4, the cells were different. They were darker, with no windows. Jake could feel something watching him as they walked past. "Level 3 is for the synthetic criminals," Vextal said. "Machines that learn to hate. They are very smart and very dangerous. They can hack into any computer system." The cells on level 3 hummed with electricity. Jake could see glowing eyes behind the metal bars. "Levels 1 and 2 are for the others," Vextal said. "Pirates, murderers, beings that have done terrible things, but are not quite as dangerous as the ones below." They returned to the control room. Vextal pulled out a thick book and handed it to Jake. "This contains everything you need to know," Vextal said. "How to feed them, how to keep them calm, how to stay alive." Jake took the book. It was heavy and looked old. "One more thing," Vextal said. "The prisoners have been asking for strange things lately. Books, music, something they call human stories. The previous guards thought it was some kind of trick, but they gave them what they wanted anyway. It seemed to keep them quiet." Jake looked at his team. Amy was checking the security systems. Nick was reading the prisoner files. Lisa was watching the screens with wide eyes. "We can handle this," Jake said. Vextal nodded. "I hope you are right. I really hope you are right." The alien gathered his things and left. Jake was now in charge of the most dangerous prison in the galaxy. He looked around the control room, then at his team. "All right," he said. "Let's get to work." Jake's first week at Titan's Hold was not what he expected. He thought the prisoners would try to escape or attack the guards. He thought there would be fights and chaos. Instead, the prison was strangely quiet. Every morning, Jake walked through the prison levels. He checked on the prisoners and made sure everything was working. The first few times, he was very careful. He wore thick armor and carried a big gun. But after a few days, he started to relax. The prisoners watched him when he walked by their cells. But they did not try to attack him. They did not scream or throw things. They just watched him with curious eyes. On his 6th day, Jake decided to visit Gorak. The huge Krillian was sitting in his cell, looking at something in his hands. When Jake got closer, he saw that Gorak was holding a small book. "What are you reading?" Jake asked. Gorak looked up. His dark eyes seemed different somehow. Less angry, more interested. It is a story about humans, Gorak said. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks falling down a mountain. It tells about a human who saves his friends even though it might kill him. Jake was surprised. He had expected Gorak to be angry and violent. Instead, the creature seemed almost calm. "Do you like the story?" Jake asked. Gorak nodded slowly. "I do not understand it. On my world, we do not save others. We save ourselves. But this human in the story, he chooses to die for his friends." Why would he do that? Jake thought about it. Because he loves them. Because some things are more important than staying alive. Gorak stared at Jake for a long time. "Love," he said, like he was trying to understand the word. "This is a human thing?" "Yes," Jake said. "Humans love their families, their friends, even people they don't know." Gorak went back to reading his book. Jake walked away, feeling confused. This was not the monster he had been told about. Later, that day, Amy came to find Jake. She looked excited and worried at the same time. "You need to see this," she said. She led him to level 4, where the Void Stalkers were kept. The hallway was dark and cold. Jake could feel something watching him from the shadows. Amy stopped in front of a cell. Inside, Jake could see a shape that seemed to be made of darkness itself. It moved like smoke, but Jake could see glowing eyes in the center of it. "Listen," Amy whispered. Jake listened. At first, he heard nothing. Then, very quietly, he heard a voice. The shadow creature was speaking. "The woods are lovely, dark and deep," the voice said. "But I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep." Jake knew those words. It was a poem by Robert Frost, a human poet from Earth. "It's been doing this for hours," Amy said, reciting human poetry. "Where did it learn that?" Jake looked at the creature. "Where did you learn those words?" he asked. The shadow turned toward him. When it spoke, its voice was like wind through empty places. "From the learning box," it said. "The previous guards gave us learning boxes. They have human words, human songs, human stories." Jake realized what the creature meant. The entertainment systems Vextal had mentioned. The previous guards had given the prisoners access to human culture. "Why do you like the poems?" Jake asked. The shadow creature moved closer to the bars. "They speak of things I have never felt. Beauty, sadness, hope. On my world, there is only hunger and darkness. But humans, you feel many things. You see beauty in small things. A flower, a sunset, the face of someone you love." Jake felt a chill run down his back. This creature had spent its whole life in darkness, feeding on fear. But now it was learning about beauty and love. Over the next few days, Jake and his team discovered more strange things. Nick found that several prisoners on level 3, the synthetic criminals, had been trying to write music. They had somehow connected their electronic brains to the entertainment systems and were creating songs. "They're not very good songs," Nick said, playing one for Jake. It sounded like broken computer noises. "But they're trying to make something beautiful." Lisa discovered that the prisoners had been trading books and movies between their cells. They had found ways to share the human stories with each other. "The pirates on level 2 have been watching old Earth movies," Lisa said. "Romantic comedies. They keep asking me to explain why the humans in the movies care so much about each other." Jake started visiting different prisoners every day. He talked to them about the human stories they were reading and watching. Each conversation was stranger than the last. A group of Zephyrian killers had been reading children's books. They were fascinated by stories where good always won over evil. "On our world, the strong kill the weak," one of them told Jake. "But in these human stories, the weak sometimes win because they are good. How is this possible?" A synthetic assassin had been watching documentaries about human families. It could not understand why humans took care of their children for so long. Human offspring are weak for many years, the machine said. On other worlds, weak offspring are left to die. But humans protect their young, teach them, love them. This makes no sense, but it is ... beautiful. Jake started to realize something amazing. These prisoners were not becoming less dangerous because they were afraid of the human guards. They were becoming less dangerous because they were learning about human emotions and values. The most surprising discovery came from Dr. Zara Khan, the prison's doctor. She was a small woman with kind eyes who had been studying the prisoners' behavior. "I've been here for 2 years," she told Jake. "When I first arrived, the prisoners were exactly what you'd expect. Violent, angry, unpredictable. But something changed when they got access to human entertainment." She showed Jake her reports. The number of fights between prisoners had dropped to almost 0. The prisoners were eating their food instead of throwing it. They were sleeping better and seemed less stressed. "It's like they're learning to be different," Dr. Khan said. "They're seeing examples of another way to live." Jake thought about this. As he walked through the prison that night, he stopped at Gorak's cell. The huge Krillian was reading another book. "What story is it tonight?" Jake asked. Gorak looked up. "It is about a human mother who saves her child from a fire. She runs into a burning building even though she might die." "What do you think of that?" Jake asked. Gorak was quiet for a long time. "On my world, a mother would save herself and let the child die. But this human mother chooses differently. She loves her child more than her own life." Gorak put the book down and looked at Jake. "I killed many mothers on my world. I thought they were weak because they cried when I hurt their children. But now I think maybe they were not weak. Maybe they were strong in a way I did not understand." Jake felt something change in that moment. He realized that these prisoners were not just reading human stories for entertainment. They were learning about emotions they had never experienced. They were discovering that there were other ways to live besides violence and cruelty. As Jake walked back to his quarters, he thought about what Vextal had said. The alien had been right. Nobody was ready for this place. But maybe that was because nobody had understood what this place really was. It was not just a prison. It was a school, a place where the most violent beings in the galaxy were learning to be something different. And the teachers were not the human guards. The teachers were human stories, human movies, human songs. The prisoners were learning about humanity, and in doing so, they were learning about parts of themselves they never knew existed. Jake smiled as he went to sleep that night. Tomorrow, he would continue his rounds. He would talk to more prisoners about their human stories. And maybe, just maybe, he would help them learn that even the most dangerous beings in the galaxy could choose to be something better. 2 months had passed since Jake took command of Titan's Hold. The prison was not the same place it had been when he arrived. Something important was happening, and Jake was starting to understand what it was. Dr. Zara Khan called Jake to her office early one morning. She looked excited, but also worried. On her desk were many papers covered with notes and charts. "I need to show you something," she said. "I've been studying the prisoners for a long time, and I think I know why only humans can guard this place." Jake sat down and listened. Dr. Khan had been working at Titan's Hold longer than any other human. She knew the prisoners better than anyone. "When I first came here, I thought it was because humans were tough," she said. "I thought we were chosen because we could handle the violence. But I was wrong." She pulled out a thick file and opened it. Inside were pictures and reports about different alien worlds. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a picture of a red planet covered in storms. "This is Krillia, where Gorak comes from. The storms never stop. The ground is covered with sharp rocks and poisonous plants. The only way to survive is to be stronger and meaner than everything else. She turned to another picture. This one showed a dark, empty space between stars. The void stalkers come from places like this. No light, no warmth, no life except what they can find and destroy. They learn to survive by feeding on the fear and pain of others. Jake looked at more pictures. Worlds covered in ice. Worlds with no water. Worlds where machines had taken over and learned to hate everything alive. Every one of these worlds has something in common, Dr. Khan said. They are all places where being kind means dying, where helping others gets you killed, where love and friendship are weaknesses that will get you eaten. Jake started to understand. So these prisoners never learned to care about others. Exactly, Dr. Khan said. But Earth is different. Earth is dangerous, but it's dangerous in a different way. She pulled out pictures of Earth. Forests and oceans, mountains and plains, animals and plants living together. Earth has predators and prey, just like other worlds, she said. But humans didn't survive by being the strongest or the meanest. Humans survived by working together. Jake thought about human history. Early humans hunting in groups, building cities together, taking care of their sick and old. Humans are the only species in the galaxy that came from a dangerous world, but learned to cooperate instead of compete. Dr. Khan continued. Every other species from a death world learned that survival means being alone and violent. But humans learned that survival means being together and caring. She showed Jake more reports. Studies of human behavior compared to other species. Humans are the only species that will risk their lives for strangers, she said. The only species that creates art and music just for beauty. The only species that takes care of members who cannot take care of themselves. Jake thought about the prisoners he had been talking to. They were all fascinated by these human traits. That's why the human stories affect them so much, Jake said. Yes, Dr. Khan said. They're seeing examples of behavior they never imagined was possible. They're learning that there are other ways to be strong. That afternoon, Jake visited Nick on level 3. Nick had been spending a lot of time with the synthetic prisoners, trying to understand how their electronic minds worked. You need to see this, Nick said, leading Jake to a cell where several synthetic criminals were kept. The machines inside looked like metal skeletons with glowing eyes. They had been built to be perfect killers, but now they were doing something very different. Show him what you've been working on, Nick said to the machines. One of the synthetics moved forward. Its voice sounded like a computer, but there was something else in it. Something that almost sounded like emotion. We have been trying to understand human feelings, the machine said. We have created programs that simulate what you call love, hope, and sadness. The machine showed Jake a screen. On it were patterns of light that changed and moved. This is our attempt to create beauty, the machine said. We do not know if it is beautiful, but we made it because we wanted to make something that was not meant to destroy. Jake stared at the patterns. They were simple, but there was something peaceful about them. Why did you want to make this? Jake asked. The machine was quiet for a moment. We were created to kill. We were very good at killing. But killing is ... empty. We watched human movies and saw humans creating things. Making music, painting pictures, building homes. We wanted to try creating instead of destroying. Another synthetic moved forward. We have been talking to each other about what it means to be alive. We think maybe being alive is not about being the strongest or the smartest. Maybe being alive is about making things that matter to others. Jake felt amazed. These machines had been designed to be perfect weapons, but they were learning to value creation over destruction. Later that day, Jake visited Amy on level 4. She had been working with the Void Stalkers, trying to understand their strange behavior. They've been asking me to read to them, Amy said. They want to hear human stories, but they want a human voice to tell them. Jake followed Amy to the cell where Shadow That Feeds lived. The creature was still a moving shadow, but it seemed less frightening now. Will you read to us? The shadow asked when it saw Jake. Jake looked at Amy. She handed him a book of human fairy tales. Which story do you want to hear? Jake asked. The one about the princess who saves the dragon, the shadow said. Jake found the story and began to read. It was about a princess who discovered that a dragon was not evil, just lonely and misunderstood. Instead of fighting the dragon, she became its friend. As Jake read, more shadows gathered around the cell. Void stalkers were listening from their own cells, drawn by the story. When Jake finished, the shadows were quiet for a long time. On our worlds, the strong always destroy the weak, one shadow finally said. But in this story, the strong one chooses to help the weak one. This is a new idea for us. Why do you like these stories? Jake asked. Shadow That Feeds moved closer to the bars. Because they show us that we do not have to be what we are made to be. The princess in this story was made to be a ruler, but she chose to be a friend. The dragon was made to be a monster, but it chose to be gentle. Jake realized something important. The prisoners were not just learning about human emotions. They were learning that they could choose to be different from what their worlds had made them. That evening, Jake called his team together. They sat in the control room, watching the screens that showed the prisoners in their cells. I think I understand now, Jake said. We're not here because we're the toughest guards. We're here because we're the only species that can show these. Prisoners a different way to live, Lisa nodded. The prisoners on levels 1 and 2 have been asking me about human families. They want to know why humans take care of each other. The synthetic criminals have been trying to write poetry, Nick added. They're not very good at it, but they're trying to express feelings they never had before. Amy smiled. Shadow That Feeds asked me yesterday what it means to have a friend. It's never had a friend before. Jake looked at the screens. In one cell, Gorak was carefully turning the pages of a book. In another, a group of pirates were watching a movie about humans helping each other after a disaster. On level 3, the synthetic criminals were working together to create more patterns of light. They're all learning, Jake said. Learning that they don't have to be what their worlds made them. Learning that they can choose to be something better. Dr. Khan joined them in the control room. The galaxy has always thought that beings from death worlds could never change, she said. But we're proving them wrong. We're showing that even the most violent creatures can learn to be peaceful. Jake thought about all the prisoners he had talked to. Each one was discovering emotions and values they had never known existed. They were learning about love, friendship, sacrifice, and hope. Tomorrow, I'm going to start something new, Jake said. I'm going to bring some of the prisoners together. Let them share their stories with each other. His team looked worried. Is that safe? Amy asked. Jake smiled. I think it's the safest thing we can do. These prisoners aren't dangerous anymore because they're afraid of us. They're becoming less dangerous because they're learning to be human. Jake's plan to bring prisoners together was working well until everything went wrong. For 3 weeks, small groups of prisoners had been meeting in a special room. They talked about the human stories they were reading. They shared what they were learning about emotions like love and friendship. Gorak had been teaching other Krillians about kindness. Shadow That Feeds was helping Void Stalkers understand the meaning of hope. The synthetic criminals were showing other machines how to create beautiful things. Instead of weapons. Then Vrektor arrived. The new prisoner came from the Nexus Wars, the worst conflict in galaxy history. He was a Nexus warlord, a being that had destroyed entire star systems just to prove his strength. When his prison ship docked with Titan's hold, Every alarm in the facility started screaming. Jake watched on the security screens as guards in. Heavy armor moved Vrektor to his cell on level 5. The creature was huge, even bigger than Gorak. Its skin was black as space and covered with scars from 1,000 battles. Its eyes glowed red with anger that had burned for centuries. This one is different, Amy said, watching the screens. Look at the other prisoners. Jake looked. The prisoners who had been calm for months were now moving restlessly in their cells. Some were growling. Others were pacing back and forth. It was like Vrektor's presence was waking up the violence they had been learning to control. Dr. Karn ran scans on the new prisoner. His brain chemistry is unlike anything I've seen, she told Jake. Most of our prisoners came from worlds where violence was necessary for survival. But this one chose violence even when he didn't need to. He enjoys causing pain. Jake decided to visit Vrektor himself. He went to level 5, wearing full armor and carrying every weapon he could fit on his belt. 2 security robots followed him. Vrektor's cell was at the end of the hallway. As Jake walked toward it, he could hear the creature laughing. It was a sound like metal being torn apart. So, Vrektor said when he saw Jake, you are the human who thinks he can tame monsters. Jake stopped a safe distance from the cell. I'm Commander Phillips. Welcome to Titan's Hold. Vrektor pressed his face against the bars. His breath smelled like burning planets. I have heard about this place. About how you humans have made the prisoners weak with your stories and your feelings. The prisoners are learning, Jake said. Learning that there are better ways to live than violence. Vrektor laughed again. Learning? They are forgetting what they are. They are forgetting that the strong should rule and the weak should die. Jake felt a chill. This creature was not like the other prisoners. The others had been violent because their worlds had taught them to be. But Vrektor was violent because he chose to be. Your human stories will not work on me, Vrektor continued. I know what I am. I am destruction. I am the end of hope. And I will remind the others what they are too. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He walked through the prison, checking on the prisoners. Many of them seemed upset. Some were not reading their books. Others were staring at the walls with the same angry eyes they had when Jake first arrived. The next morning, trouble started. During breakfast time, a fight broke out on level 2. 3 Zephyrian pirates attacked a group of synthetic criminals. The fight was vicious and bloody. It took 10 guards with stun weapons to stop it. Why did you fight? Jake asked one of the pirates afterwards. The pirate looked confused and angry. I don't know. I was thinking about the new prisoner, about what he said, about how we've become weak. I got angry. Similar fights broke out on other levels. Prisoners who had been peaceful for months were suddenly violent again. They seemed to be remembering who they used to be. Jake realized what was happening. Vrektor was not just a prisoner. He was a leader. He was reminding the other prisoners of their old ways. His presence was like a poison, spreading through the prison. The situation got worse over the next few days. More fights broke out. Prisoners stopped reading their books and watching their movies. They began to act like the dangerous criminals they had been before. On the 4th day, the worst happened. A full prison riot started on level 5. It began when Vrektor somehow broke the bars of his cell. Jake never found out how he did it. Maybe he was stronger than anyone thought. Maybe he had help from other prisoners. Vrektor moved through level 5, breaking open other cells. He freed the most dangerous Krillians and Void Stalkers first. Then he moved to level 4. Alarms screamed throughout the prison. Jake and his team ran to the control room and watched in horror as dozens of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy poured out of their cells. Seal the levels, Jake ordered. Don't let them spread to the upper floors. Amy worked frantically at the controls. The security doors are jammed. Something is overriding the system. Nick pointed at a screen. The synthetic criminals on level 3. They're helping with the riot. They're using their computer skills to break the security systems. Jake felt sick. All the progress they had made was disappearing. The prisoners were becoming monsters again. But then something unexpected happened. On the screens, Jake saw Gorak step out of his cell. But instead of joining the riot, the huge Krillian moved to block the hallway. Behind him came other long-term prisoners, the ones who had been learning about human values for months. What are they doing? Lisa asked. Jake watched in amazement as Gorak faced Vrektor. The two massive creatures stood in the hallway, staring at each other. You have forgotten what you are, Vrektor growled. You have let these humans make you weak. Gorak shook his head. I have not forgotten what I am. I have learned what I can become. You read their stories and watch their movies like a child, Vrektor said. You have forgotten the strength that comes from fear and pain. I have found a different kind of strength, Gorak replied. The strength that comes from choosing to protect instead of destroy. The two creatures fought. It was a terrible battle. Gorak was strong, but Vrektor was stronger. Jake watched helplessly as his friend, the prisoner who had learned to read human stories, was beaten down. But Gorak was not alone. Shadow that feeds appeared from the darkness, wrapping around Vrektor like smoke. The synthetic criminals who had remained loyal to their new values used their abilities to shut down the security systems that Vrektor's followers had compromised. Battle raged through the lower levels of the prison. But it was not just a battle between prisoners. It was a battle between two different ways of thinking. Between the old way of violence and destruction and the new way of cooperation and creation. Jake could not just watch anymore. He grabbed his weapon and headed for level 5. Jake, don't, Amy called after him. It's too dangerous. Those prisoners are fighting for something they learned from us, Jake said. I have to help them. Jake ran through the prison corridors. He could hear the sounds of battle echoing from the lower levels. When he reached level 5, he saw Gorak on the ground, badly hurt but still moving. Vrektor stood over him, ready to deliver the final blow. This is what happens to those who choose weakness, Vrektor said. Jake stepped into the hallway. Gorak isn't weak, he said. He's stronger than you'll ever be. Vrektor turned toward Jake. A human. How appropriate. You will die with your pet monster. But Jake was not alone. Behind him came Amy, Nick, and Lisa. They were scared, but they were there. And behind them came something that made Jake's heart soar. Prisoners from all levels of the prison were coming. Not to join the riot, but to stop it. They were choosing to protect the guards who had shown them a better way to live. The battle for Titan's Hold was not won by superior weapons or stronger fighters. It was won by something Vrektor could not understand. It was won by beings who had learned to fight not for themselves, but for others. When the riot was finally over, Vrektor was back in his cell, but this time with bars that could not be broken. Many of the prisoners who had joined his riot were injured and ashamed, but the prisoners who had chosen to defend the prison were changed. They had proven to themselves that they were not the monsters their worlds had made them. They were something new, something better. Jake sat with Gorak in the medical bay. The big Krillian was hurt but alive. Why did you fight him? Jake asked. You could have joined the riot. You could have been free. Gorak looked at Jake with his dark eyes. There was pain in them, but also something else, something that looked like peace. I read a story yesterday, Gorak said slowly, about a human soldier who stayed behind to save his friends. He could have run away and lived, but he chose to stay and fight so others could escape safely. Gorak winced as Dr. Karn checked his wounds. I used to think that soldier was foolish. Gorak continued. Why would anyone choose to suffer for others? But now I understand. He was not foolish. He was brave. He was strong in a way I never knew existed. Jake felt tears in his eyes. You saved us all, Gorak. No, Gorak said. You saved us. You and your stories. You showed us that we do not have to be what our worlds made us. We can choose to be something better. Dr. Khan finished treating Gorak's wounds. He'll be fine, she told Jake. But it will. Take time to heal. Jake nodded. He looked around the medical bay. Several other prisoners were there, being treated for injuries from the riot, but they were not angry or violent. They seemed proud of what they had done. Shadow that feeds drifted. Near the ceiling, its dark form moving slowly. We learned Summith. 6 months after the riot, Titan's Hold looked like a completely different place. The gray walls were now covered with artwork made by the prisoners. Gorak had learned to paint, and his pictures showed scenes from human stories. They were not very good paintings, but they were full of hope and color. Shadow that feeds had learned to write poetry. The dark creature's poems were strange and beautiful, full of words about light and friendship and love. Other void stalkers were learning to write too. The synthetic criminals had built a small music room where they created songs together. Their music was getting better. Some of it almost sounded like human music, but with electronic sounds that made it special and knew. Jake walked through the prison every day, but now it felt more like walking through a school than a jail. Prisoners called out greetings to him. They wanted to show him their latest artwork or read him their newest poems. Commander Jake called a Zephyrian pirate from level 2. Look what I made. A pirate held up a small sculpture made from leftover metal. It looked like 2 figures holding hands. It represents friendship, the pirate said proudly. I learned about it from a human movie. 2 beings who are different, but care about each other anyway. Jake smiled. It's beautiful. What are you going to do with it? I want to give it to Gorak, the pirate said. He saved us during the riot. I want him to know that I am grateful. This was happening all over the prison. Prisoners were making gifts for each other. They were learning to show appreciation and love. These were emotions that none of them had ever felt before. Dr. Khan met Jake in the control room with amazing news. I just received word from the Galactic Council, she said, waving a message pad excitedly. They want to visit Titan's Hold. They've heard about what we're doing here. Jake felt nervous. What do they want? They want to see if our methods can work in other prisons, Dr. Khan said. The crime rate in the galaxy is still very high. Most prisons just hold criminals until they die. They don't try to change them. This was true. Most alien species believed that violent criminals could never change. They just locked them up and forgot about them. But we've proven that's wrong, Jake said. We've shown that even the most dangerous beings can learn to be different. Dr. Khan nodded. The recidivism rate at Titan's Hold is 0, Jake. 0. No prisoner who has been released from here has committed another crime. That's never happened before in galactic history. Jake thought about the few prisoners who had been released. They had gone back to their home worlds or found new places to live. But they stayed in contact with Titan's Hold. They sent letters and videos, showing how they were using what they had learned. One former prisoner, a Krillian warrior, had started a school on his home planet. He was teaching young Krillians about human values. Another, a void stalker, had become an artist. Its dark, beautiful sculptures were becoming famous across the galaxy. That afternoon, Jake received a call from Admiral Susan Hayes. She was the head of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force, one of the most important people in the galaxy. Commander Phillips, she said when her image appeared on the communication screen. I've been reading the reports about Titan's Hold. They are quite remarkable. Jake stood at attention. Thank you, Admiral. I want to visit your facility. Admiral Hayes said. "I'm bringing a team of experts from different worlds. We need to see this transformation for ourselves." Jake felt worried. What if the visit went wrong? What if the prisoners acted badly in front of the visitors? "When will you arrive, Admiral?" "Tomorrow," she said. "I know it's short notice, but this is too important to wait." After the call ended, Jake gathered his team. Amy, Nick, and Lisa looked as nervous as he felt. "What if the prisoners don't cooperate?" Amy asked. "What if they act violent in front of the Admiral?" "They won't," Jake said, trying to sound confident. "They've changed. They'll want to show the galaxy what they've learned." But privately, Jake was worried too. So much depended on this visit. If it went well, other prisons might adopt their methods. Thousands of violent criminals across the galaxy might get the chance to change and become better beings. If it went badly, Titan's hold might be shut down. The prisoners might be sent to regular jails where they would forget everything they had learned. Jake decided to talk to the prisoners. He called a meeting in the main assembly hall. It was the first time all the prisoners had been in the same room together since the riot. They came from all 5 levels. Krillians sat next to void stalkers. Synthetic criminals talked quietly with Zephyrian pirates. Former enemies had become friends through their shared love of human stories and values. "Tomorrow, we're having very important visitors," Jake told them. "People from the Galactic Council and the Peacekeeping Force. They want to see what we've accomplished here." Gorak raised his huge hand. "What do they want to see?" "They want to see if you've really changed," Jake said honestly. "They want to know if other prisons can use our methods." The prisoners looked at each other. Shadow that feeds spoke from the back of the room. "What if they don't believe us?" The dark creature asked. "What if they think we are just pretending to be different?" Jake had wondered the same thing. "Then we'll have to show them that the change is real. We'll have to prove that you've become something new." A synthetic criminal rolled forward. "How can we prove this?" Jake thought about it. "By being yourselves. By showing them your art, your poetry, your music. By demonstrating the kindness and cooperation you've learned." An old Zephyrian pirate stood up. "What if they tried to take us away from here, back to regular prisons?" Jake felt his heart break a little. The prisoners were not just worried about impressing the visitors. They were worried about losing their home, because that's what Titan's hold had become for them. It was not just a prison anymore. It was a place where they belonged, where they could learn and grow and become better beings. "I won't let that happen," Jake promised. "This is your home now, and home should be protected." The next day, Admiral Hayes arrived with her team. There were military officers, scientists, psychologists, and representatives from different alien governments. They all looked skeptical and worried. Jake met them at the docking bay. Admiral Hayes was a tall woman with gray hair and intelligent eyes. She studied Jake carefully. "Commander Phillips," she said, "I've read your reports, but I have to admit, I find them hard to believe. The idea that violent criminals can be reformed has been tried before. It has never worked." "This is different," Jake said. "We're not just trying to reform them. We're teaching them to be human." One of the alien representatives, a tall insectoid creature, made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. "Humans are not special, Commander. Every species thinks their way of life is superior." Jake led the group through the prison. The visitors expected to see the usual things: heavily armed guards, thick walls, prisoners locked in small cells. Instead, they saw artwork on the walls, music coming from common rooms, and prisoners who looked happy and peaceful. "This is impossible," whispered a military officer. "These are some of the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy." They stopped at Gorak's cell. The huge Krillian was painting a picture of a human family sitting around a dinner table. "What are you doing?" Admiral Hayes asked. Gorak looked up and smiled. I am painting a scene from a human story I read. It shows a family sharing food and talking about their day. On my world, families do not exist. The strong kill the weak, even their own offspring. But humans take care of each other. They share their food and their feelings. Why does this interest you? The Admiral asked. Gorak put down his brush. Because it shows me a different way to be strong. I used to think strength meant being able to kill anyone who opposed me. But now I think strength means being able to protect and care for others. The visitors moved to level 4, where Shadow That Feeds was reading poetry to a group of other Void Stalkers. What we once sought in darkness, Shadow read, we now find in light. What we once took by force, we now receive through kindness. What we once destroyed in anger, we now create in love. The poem was simple, but it was beautiful. The visitors listened in amazement as creatures that had once been pure darkness spoke about light and love. On level 3, the synthetic criminals had prepared a concert. Their electronic music filled the air with sounds that were both mechanical and somehow deeply emotional. We programmed ourselves to feel, one machine explained to the visitors. Not because we were ordered to, but because we wanted to understand what it means to care about something other than ourselves. The visit continued for hours. The prisoners showed their art, read their poetry, performed their music. They answered questions honestly and openly. They shared what they had learned about kindness, cooperation, and love. But the most impressive moment came when one of the visitors, a young military officer, accidentally dropped his weapon. It clattered across the floor and landed near a group of Krillian prisoners. The visitors tensed, expecting the prisoners to grab the weapon and try to escape. Instead, one of the Krillians picked up the weapon and carefully handed it back to the officer. You dropped this, the Krillian said politely. Be more careful. Weapons are dangerous. The officer stared at the Krillian in shock. You gave it back. Of course, the Krillian said. It belongs to you. And besides, I do not need weapons anymore.